And we are a relatively large church. We've got over 100 members, and on a Sunday, 80 plus attendees. And just before COVID, the minister we had at the time got together a group of people who were interested in eco stroke green affairs. And we talked a bit about starting Eco Church. And then obviously COVID hit and the group had to disband. But I decided that it'd be good if we carried on with trying to get our bronze award, which we started during COVID. And I found that with bronze, most of the work I could do myself. And then after we achieved the award in June 2022, we moved on to silver. And I think the big difference I first of all found out with silver, we needed a team of people to share the work, share the load, because it has become it was more difficult, more complicated to satisfy all the things in the survey. I'll set this up. We were very lucky in Salisbury because pre-COVID, we had property team who decided they were going to put solar panels on the roof of the hall. And then just after COVID, the boiler went bang. And so we decided to have a new boiler. It had to be a gas boiler for the size, but we also decided to put in an air source heat pump and along with that, battery storage. And the property team also put in a lot of LED lighting and they put in sensors in the toilets and things. So a lot of the things that are required on the property side for our building were done. I didn't need to do anything really. But it was the other factors, the other parts that I needed help with. And we had a couple of people who decided that they were going to take on the recycling. And we have one church in our circuit that were very big into recycling, and we pinched a lot of their ideas. We've got a garden, and a younger member of the church decided he was going to take on managing the garden. And he then looked at that from Eco Church perspective. So we needed people to help. And that's the first thing. The next thing I think is obviously, if you're all people here who have got bronze award or nearly finishing bronze, when you go on to silver, then you'll be starting with the new survey. And it is very, very different. I was lucky. All I had to do was take one survey and then move up a gear. And the first thing I would suggest is have a really, really good look at the new survey. Rose will probably talk a bit more about it. She's got more expertise than I have because I've only done silver under the old system. And the questions there are much more evidence based, and you will need to find people in your church who can help you produce that evidence. And at this point, I don't want to say I want to put anybody off, but I think you will find it harder to get silver under the new survey than you would have done under the old one. It is more rigorous, and in many ways, I think it is a lot better. It's asking us to find evidence, find structure to what we are doing. But it does mean that I don't think any one person can do it on their own. So if you're coming from a small church, I have been out in our circuit and I've been talking to people in the smaller churches where perhaps one or two people are taking the whole thing on. And that used to be just about possible for, I don't think it is now. I think you need to have everybody on board. Yeah. Methodism starting with church council. If you're in a Church of England church, you need to get the PCC on board. If you haven't got those people on board, then I think you will struggle. In the same way, yeah, you need the minister on board. If they, under the worship section, it talks about how often do creation get mentioned in worship. If the minister is taking a large number of the services and isn't really into it, then you're going to have issues with doing that. So I think there are things that then you need to look at. And what I've done is I've asked James to produce some slides just looking at the new survey. So is it possible, James, to put the first one up?
Absolutely, and I'll just do that now for you. I'll just share the screen.
Right. That was when we had a big district event when we welcomed a new district chair. Okay, on to the next one, please. Right. New eco survey, similar headings. But if you look at, for instance, the fourth one down, it says community and global engagement. So that section has been widened. And the others are similar, but building and energy rather than just buildings. And I'll come on to that in a moment. And again, when you look at the survey, you'll see that, as it says there, where in the past you just picked, yes, no, working towards, need help, or whatever, this time you've got multiple choice answers. So it becomes more focused, if you like. Okay, next one, please, James. Right. So, for instance, I picked examples from some of the headings, and the first one is worship. Right. Our ministers, leaders, preachers can preach confidently about creation, care, and environmental issues. Right. I suspect if you are in a Methodist church where you have minister and local preachers, the answer that yes, all of them is very unlikely. Some training is needed. I mean, I have talked to our local preachers secretary saying, can she make sure that at local preachers meetings, Eco Church is brought up and her local preachers are getting more confident in talking about Eco Church and creation and create. We are now more focused on creation time. We've borrowed that from the Church of England. So at the appropriate time of year, we do that, but it's the rest of the year as well. Yeah. So that's that one. Okay, next one, please, James. Right, buildings and energy. Yeah. In the past, how well insulated is your building, etc. Now you're asked to find out what the carbon footprint of your building is. And there's a tool on a website, Climate Stewards, and you need information from somebody, either the treasurer or somebody in the property side. So you need to know how much money you're spending on electricity, how much money are you spending on gas, how much water are you using, and that is something, obviously, I assume most of you cannot do on your own. So this new survey is focusing more on providing evidence as to how green you are. And that's just one question. But there are other questions in that section that you need help with getting the evidence. Okay, James.
Okay.
And once you've, what is the carbon footprint used in your church buildings? Once you've done the survey, you can actually work it out. I have no idea what ours is because when I did it silver on the old survey, I didn't need to do it. But by using that tool, you can find that out. Okay. Right. In the old survey, I always say to someone I was talking to other churches, if you haven't got a church garden, it made life very easy because the old survey focused on land and how you maintained it, but also how you invited members of the community onto your land and how it is managed. Now, that is still there, but you need to be able to actually produce a land management plan. Whoever is looking after your garden or your car park, which has got some flower beds round it, have you a plan to manage it? Are you managing it in a way that is sustainable for the animals and nature that is there? Do you provide facilities for wild plants? Do you provide facilities for animals? Do you have a pond? Do you grow veg, etc.? Do you have bird boxes? We've put up some bird feeders and we've enlisted the rainbows who are on our site once a week to go and replenish the bird feeders, which gives something in land, but also in community engagement as well. But you need to have a plan for your land now. Okay, fine. I just picked some examples there, but the other parts of the survey are equally important. And again, when you get on to the lifestyle, I found in the old survey again that I could put something in our magazine which said, I'm encouraging you members of the congregation to amend your lifestyle in this way. I think in the new survey, we would need to be more proactive in how we encourage our congregation to do that. And it is sometimes very difficult. There's a question somewhere in the survey about the food we produce. And I'm hoping that this doesn't go beyond this meeting, but we have people who will cook lovely meals, but they're only meat-based. They don't account for vegetarians. They don't account for vegans. So there are certain bits of the survey that we just have to get across against. But in the new survey, there always were resources. In the new survey, at the bottom of each section, there are lists of resources which you can either download or some of them you can get from A Rocha. And I would recommend that when you do each survey, you look at the resources, see what there is, and how that can help you. And if you get them all, you'll have quite a little library. Right. So I don't want to put you off carrying on. I think it's a brilliant thing, and I'm absolutely delighted. But we got bronze in a year and a bit. We got silver in just over a year under the old survey. I think it'll take you a lot longer to do it under the new survey. Okay, over to Rose.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you here. One or two faces I recognise, and including one from my district, which is Yorkshire North and East Methodist District. I'm from Summer Ridge Methodist Church. We received our Gold Award, as James said, in 2020. And about a year after that, I started becoming a Gold Award assessor for A. Rocha, and I'm a speaker as well. I think I've probably done about 10 or 11 Gold Award assessments now. But I didn't really, I know some of you will be at bronze, some of you might be at silver, you'll all be at different stages, but I really wanted to share some ideas with you, just things that I've seen, because Jim has very clearly laid out some of the things about the new survey, and it's very kind of him, but I'm definitely not an expert on the new survey at all, because at the moment we're experiencing what A. Rocha are calling a gold rush. So we've got over 40 gold award applications under the old scheme. Which we are working through, and we've only got one so far as of the middle of last week, I think, under the new scheme. So I am much more au fait with the old scheme, so don't ask me too many technical questions. But I do know broadly that the new scheme is very much about ensuring that creation care is embedded across your whole church. And I think that's exciting. When I went to some training a couple of weeks ago with Helen Stevens, who I believe is talking to you next month, she was saying how the new survey is kind of, will end up with churches that are much more effective in their work for creation, really. So I think that's exciting. So what I wanted to do then is not talk too much about the detail, but just talk you through some of the things I've seen. So if we start, actually, I think some of the details been covered by Jim. So if we start, James, with slide number 9, I think we'll start with. So as I've gone out and done Gold Award assessments, I've seen all sorts of interesting things. And so these are just some of the things, and hopefully they will give you some ideas. You may have seen some of them before, some of them may be at your church, but this is just to sort of share some of the things. And I guess one of the principles is that every church is completely different. So when you go and out and look at a church for a gold award, or indeed when you're applying for silver or bronze, you will have all sorts of different unique selling points. So please don't feel you have to say yes to absolutely every question on the survey. You don't, but you do. It's really good to set up an action plan and start working towards some of the areas. So if we can we move forward a little bit? Because I think you already know about the different categories in the new system. And if we can stop at slide 8, which is the awards, the next one, if that's all right. Yeah, that's lovely. So this is obviously what people are aiming for. And churches, as I said, get to this in different ways. So one of the things that we've done at my church, which I'm very proud of, is our recycling centre. And lots of people have recycling. And if you can move on to the next slide, you can see what our recycling centre looks like. We recycle about 18 waste streams at the moment, which are not recycled commonly at your door, or sometimes even at the local recycling centre. We partner with TerraCycle to collect things which are then can be recycled permanently. So they're not recycled like soft plastics are again and again and again and again. They're recycled into playground equipment and all sorts of things that last forever. Not perhaps forever, but for 100 years. And that's something that has also had the knock-on effect of bringing the community in as well. We have our recycling centre open when our community cafe is on, and at the same, so people can come in, they get to know the church, they see what we're up to, we talk to them, we give them a warm welcome, and we encourage them to recycle at the same time. So that works well. One of the other things which I often find when I look around churches is it's not always visible to people when they come into the church that this is an eco church. This is a church that cares about creation. And if we move on to the next slide, you can see a few examples of creation care notice boards, leaflets. These particular ones are about all sorts of different topics that, about creation care and environmental issues, campaigning and all sorts of things. And then the next slide, that is from I'm trying to remember which church it was now. The one on the left, I think, was Silsden. How did you know that? Silsden Methodist Church, and that's about their reusing and recycling, and that was a specific. That's a specific thing that they did. And then the one on the right is a church in Cornwall, and they use their village hall to showcase creation care issues specifically around what they'd found when they'd done biodiversity surveys in their churchyard. So that was really good because it was being shared with the general community as well, as it was at Silsden, because they have a lot of people coming through that building. So then the next slide is just another example of the kind of displays that you could have. The one on the right, it's another church in Cornwall, and they again showcased what they'd been able to find in their churchyard. And you've even got tiny little felt animals there that were made by a member of the congregation, which were wonderful. And on the left-hand side of that slide, you can see some a floral arrangement. And that's one of the things we do notice when we go around the churches, that sometimes the flowers are imported from Australia and all sorts of places. So it's wonderful to go to a church where we can see that the eco team have shared the creation care message with the floral arrangement team, if there is such a thing, and that they are using foliage from their own gardens and from the church grounds as well. So that's always good to see. And then another thing that we tend to look for is how you are using your grounds for biodiversity and for wildlife. And some of the examples here that I've seen, the one on the left-hand side when we're on the next slide. The one on the left-hand side is from Baildon Methodist Church, and they had a little bird bath hanging from the tree, and they also had a solitary bee log where there's been holes bored into it. So that was a lovely way of offering a little habitat for wildlife. And they also had quite a diversity of planting as well there for different times of year, for birds, for insects and so on. And then on the right-hand side is a slow worm house, which I'd never seen before. And that was, again, another church down in Cornwall. And there they'd used the opportunity of getting involved with local school children who'd created information sheets about all the different creatures that they'd seen. So, and they used those as display boards. So that was interesting as well. And then on to the next slide. And I think this is a hedgehog house. I can't quite remember. I think that was Baildon as well. So again, good to see housing for bats and owls and birds and all sorts of things in different churches. And obviously, even little piles of twigs provide a wonderful habitat for all sorts of creatures. And so does ivy, which we never mind seeing ivy when we go and do a Gold Church assessment. So the next slide is just some other housing. That was again at Silsden on the left-hand side. They'd made a bug hotel, a magnificent bug hotel, and we've seen some really good Bug hotels, that was fantastic. We've seen some made out of piles of 6 pallets with all sorts of things put in there. So it's something, again, that's great to get children and young people involved with, families involved with, people who perhaps come to your activities, toddler groups, all sorts of things can get involved. All sorts of people can get involved with things like that. The on the right hand side there again, we've got Baildon Methodist Church, and they're a bit more of their planting for biodiversity there. The next slide. Sorry, a lot of these other than Cornwall are up north. I apologise for that. You'll have to send me some from your areas down south to include in it. But this one is Clitheroe United Reformed Church, and they were in a town and they didn't have very much in the way of outdoor area, but they used their shed roof, which is on the left hand side, for a local restaurant to plant herbs, pea shoots, all sorts of different vegetables and mint, you name it, chives, all sorts was on top of there. So that was a really creative way of using a small space. And as the restaurant was only 20 feet from the back door of the church, very, very few air miles going on there with that food. So that was good. We've also got here a compost heap and a small water butt. And again, these are things that some churches find very difficult to provide. Other churches, including, I went to do an assessment at St Mark's Church in Harrogate on Friday, and they had 5 compost bins and leaf mulch. So there's a lot you can do if you have land, but we don't all have land, and we certainly don't at Sunbridge Methodist Church, which leads me on to the next slide. So the next slide just shows the kind of things we did with our garden, and it very much is garden in inverted commas. We have about a sort of 6-foot strip of tarmac round each side of the building, and then a car park at the front. So some of the things we did were to get some recycled materials from the building site next door, some old pallets. We got some tyres from the garage at the road, and we created seating and bird and bat boxes. And we had a children's holiday club where they created the planters. That's what the tyres were. They made planters. And some of the young people's groups, they used hammer and nails and saws, which they loved, of course, and they made the bench seating. We've also got the Bug Hotel, not as good as Silsden's, but it's okay. And I used an upturned dustbin lid as a bird for water for birds, which I've subsequently been told it's not actually good. So that's been replaced with a rubber dustbin lid instead, which is much better for birds, because we don't want any of the rust leaching into the water. So and then on to just thinking a bit more about garden areas. The next slide is a before and after at Settle Methodist Church. And that is, they had a very unpromising ex-car park, which had been enclosed when they extended the church. It was enclosed, completely sort of an oasis at the back that you couldn't access. So they thought, what on earth can we do with this? So using all sorts of creative use of donated and recycled materials, they have created a wonderful productive area. You can see vegetables on the right hand side. They've got fruit trees, and lots of different groups come out and use this area. And the next slide just shows it from a different angle. And again, you can see the before and after is a really dramatic change to what was there before, and a really productive area where people can go outside to be with others, but also to pray and to do outdoor worship, which is something we're very keen on as well at A Rocha. So, and talking about outdoor worship, that leads me on to the next slide. And this is a team at a church in Cornwall, down near Loo, and they had a huge churchyard area, which I'm afraid we aren't blessed with, as I said. And they had created using a gabion, which is a wire mesh framework, which they'd filled with stones and a bit of sand. And that became this wonderful altar that these people are standing beside. And everything on that altar is self-seeded. And if we move on to the next slide, we can see the view from that altar outwards. I mean, wow. And they have seating for 100 now, and they have weddings and all sorts of things. But what an idyllic place. And although we haven't all got that much space, I'm sure you can all think of creative things that you could do with your space. And maybe even if you don't have a space, I notice Lorraine Jones is somewhere amongst our group tonight, and her church, they have taken over an unused area near a GP's surgery, and they've made been part of the making of a wonderful community garden there. So if you're in her breakout group later, do chat to her about that if you can. Other things that you can get involved with, if you want to be an eco-church and you want to care for creation, are some of the many surveys and activities that go on nationwide. And I've got just 3 brief slides here to just show you examples of those. We've got Churches Count on Nature, which is in June. It's an annual species survey, which is fantastic to be part of. And then the next slide, we've got, I'm sure you've heard of these, the Big Butterfly Count and Big Garden Birdwatch, which is coming up very shortly. I don't think those dates are right because this was probably last year, but do watch out for that coming very soon. And then the next one is Great Big Green Week, which is another nationwide initiative. You can advertise your event, however big or small, on their website for free, and then that does all the publicity for you. And that's, again, a nationwide event, well worth getting involved with. The next slide is we're a bit more onto buildings here. So I think Jim's talked about measuring your carbon footprint, trying to reduce it. And that's what the next 2 slides are about. So I won't talk about that particularly. But other things that we've done within our church, just on the property side, twinning our toilets. I'm sure you will have done that. Silsden Church had twinned their garden with Ripple Effect. And Ripple Effect helped to educate women in various parts of Africa in organic gardening. So that's a wonderful thing to get involved with. We changed our toilet paper, which caused a bit of controversy when it was brown, but now it's white bamboo. So I'm more popular now. And then the next slide shows some physical things that we did on the building. So we put a Hive thermostat, which means that I can control the heating from at home, which is wonderful. But also we only need the heating on absolutely when we need it on. If a group cancels, then we can cancel it from a distance. We're not wasting any energy. We've also got one of our heating systems is zoned, so it's very controllable. If we only need the hall and kitchen on and we don't need anywhere else, that's all we put on. And then just simple signage to just let people know to switch everything off. And I do like to see signage that tells people that we care for creation. So signs in the kitchen to tell people to reuse and recycle and use environmentally friendly products. That's always wonderful to see. And I think the next slide is just about LED lighting, which Jim's talked about. So again, I won't talk about that. And then we have a slide, Baildon Methodist Church on the left-hand side, and then Summerbridge on the right-hand side, showcasing our solar panels, which in our case, we received very much thank you to the work of the district grant funding enabler and the net zero officer. And you may well have an equivalent to that in your own district. And they are a really great resource to go and talk to about potential funding. And then just the final couple of slides. This is again inspired by Silsden Methodist Church. They host a refill station and a repair cafe. And these don't have to be organised by you and your church. They can be organised by organisations outside. I think the repair cafe at Silsden is organised by Silsden Climate Action. And at our church, we have a monthly refill stall. The lady comes and she sells minimal products which are made in Yorkshire and are environmentally friendly. So it's not always something you have to do yourself, but you can perhaps think about partnering with other organisations, other churches, to get things done. And I think Jim touched on that about supporting other churches and about working together. And it really is a really good way forward. And then finally, another example from Silsden was their home energy saving workshops that they hold, just to give people advice on energy saving. And again, this may not be something you've got expertise in your church, but you might know somebody who does, or a group or an organisation locally that does. So sorry, that's been a bit of a romp through because I'm conscious we haven't got masses and masses of time, but I hope it gives you some ideas that you can kind of take home and think about in your own church. And I would really encourage you, it's a step at a time. You don't need to do everything. And any A. Rocha Award is a springboard to the next and a springboard that really it's about improving, well, the world, the planet, I guess. Sorry, that's not very eloquent, but it really is. Anything we can do to care for creation is wonderful. So thank you for all you're doing already. And I hope you come up with some inspiring ideas for your next steps in the breakout groups later. Thank you.